Good evening. Welcome to Land Title Talk. I almost forgot the talk part. I'm Steve Collins from Land Title, and as always, we have our esteemed guest here, Rusty, from the law office of J. Russell Collins. We appreciate him being here. We also have Julie Settle here, sitting in with us, keeping us in line. Thank you, Julie, for being here. And then we have our special guest today, Ryan Cardle. Can you...
The president.
Is that just horrible? I've known you for how long, and I'm going to butcher an easy last name like that.
It was an easy last name.
It was.
But that's okay. You could be Carl if you want,
Yeah.
Collins.
Ryan, you can just call me Colin, Stephen Collin. Ryan Carter from Carter Environmental Services. He's a professional wetland scientist, and he's been in our community now doing wetland assessments and working with the county and private landowners for how many years now?
About 25 years.
25 years. I met you, the first time I met you was with Frank Pepe.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Yes.
He used to have his Hawaiian shirt with a big heart surgery scar and a
Yes.
huge gold medallion, and he wore that with pride.
He was awesome.
He was awesome.
He was so fun. But so before we get into environmental services, Ryan, we like to give Rusty a second to tell us what's going on in his world.
Nothing I can talk about right now.
I like it because then we can jump right into environmental services because I think it's an interesting thing, Ryan. You know, you've been God sent for me in my business. Wetlands is a big issue in St. Johns County in Florida, period. And the rights that I would say the government has or the public has, or what would you say, who has those rights to protect our wetlands and what entity is that? Is that the public's, for the public's well-being? Is that what that is?
Yeah. I mean, federal and state law.
Okay, so federal and state law. So and we as a title company, we have to deal with that because not that it's per se a risk for us if there's no easement, because title insurance, we basically do our search, we give a title insurance policy to a landowner and say, hey, you've got good and free and clear title, and it's beautiful, and we're willing to write you a title insurance policy. But there's some exceptions, and that is we don't insure against zoning, we don't insure against ordinances, and we don't insure against wetlands that have not been that there's no easement to
Or protected species.
Or protected species.
Right.
So at what power does the state and the federal government have, and what gave them that right? Is that something you could sort of share with us? I mean, that seems a deep topic, but to where do they get the right to say to private owners, hey, you've got tortoises there, you get to spend $30,000 removing those tortoises? Where does that power come from?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, in the tortoise issue, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission passed. They administer the law that the legislature passed. It was in 2007 about requiring relocation of and actually gopher tortoise protection began sometime in the 90s. I don't know exactly when it was, but back then we obtained what's called incidental take permits, also known affectionately as the Pay and Pave program.
Say that one more time.
We joked about it, calling the Pay and Pave program. So the incidental take permit said that if you had a occupied gopher tortoise habitat, you would stroke a check to the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Land Trust. And then you could pave over those tortoises.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they call it incidental.
So pay
take.
and pave, literally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, incidental takes, but they stopped issuing incidental take permits in 2007.
Okay.
Because obviously it was inhumane. I mean,
Right.
Now they require the tortoises to be relocated to a designated recipient site that has a perpetual conservation easement.
And that's just one aspect of it. I
That's
mean,
just protected species.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what other protected species?
Well, eagles.
Eagles. Okay.
Yeah.
Owls by chance?
No.
Eagles. Okay.
Particularly eagles. And that is a big issue because there's very intense restrictions in the primary protection zone, which is 330 feet from the nest.
So if I'm 330 feet from a nest,
Yeah.
and I buy this, and I'm going to use Flagler States because Flagler States is such a unique animal. It has all of these things, right? Wetlands, eagles, tortoises, and it just seems to be a common place that we can talk about. And I don't want anybody to misconstrue. I love Flagler States. I think it's a great community.
Well, you don't find, there's not a lot of tortoises there. at all. I don't know of an experience of one, as a matter of fact. And that's because the land is poorly drained.
Okay.
And
So-
tortoises are in
But
well-drained
if somebody
habitat.
buys a lot and it's an acre and a quarter and they want to build a house there and they find 3 tortoise.
Yeah.
Tortoise. Oh my gosh.
Tortoise.
Tortoise.
A murder of tortoises.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to butcher the English language tonight for some reason, starting with your last name. They find 3 tortoises. Can we just say that? Oh, why not?
A herd of tortoises. Sure.
Okay, why not?
A flock.
A flock.
Flock of tortoises. What happens?
Well, it would be so we use different tools and layers to identify the possibility for a protected species habitat. So in the instance of a tortoise, you would look at, is it a well-drained soil? And it would be the county, because the county would be ultimately the one that's responsible to ask whoever the applicant is applying for a building permit. The county would go, hey, I see a well-drained soil on your property. I require a protected species assessment. Now, if they didn't ask and the county gives them a building permit and they go to build and a contractor shows up and he sees that there are 3 burrows on the site and they're gopher tortoises, well, then he's got a choice to make.
What is his liability if he?
Well, if he's
chooses to
if he's a
ignore
licensed general contractor and he gets in trouble either relocating or harming a threatened species, that's a felony.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Is
if he's unlicensed, then, he has nothing at stake.
Okay. What would it cost to remove 3 tortoises?
So right now, the going rate for a tortoise at a permitted recipient site is around $5,000 per tortoise. So
To
if
receive it.
to receive it, just to receive it. I'm not talking
to
about
move it.
I'm not talking about the permitting and the physical excavation and relocation of those tortoise. It would be, so, I mean, if you had 3, you could be easily be into $17,000 to $20,000.
Wow. And if you're buying a piece of property to put your, let's say a double wide manufactured home,
Yeah.
or you're building a new house, that can really put a bite out of your budget.
Correct.
And let's talk about the Eagle's Nest for a second too. So if I buy a lot that's what are they, 330 by 175, roughly 165, something like that. So if I have an Eagle's Nest that is located on the adjoining lot, what kind of restrictions would I have?
Well, if it's within the 330, it would be no development without permit, another incidental take permit, which would be not for the Eagle's Nest because you wouldn't cut that down, but it would be for encroaching into its primary protection zone.
What would that cost roughly?
Those have gotten a lot easier because the population of eagles have rebounded dramatically. There's some conversation about them getting taken off of the threatened species list. They are protected through the Migratory Bird Act as well, but it could be $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 in 6 to 8 months worth of time. Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're just trying to get generalities.
Yeah.
So I find tortoises, 3, and I have an Eagle's Nest that's within 350 feet. I'm talking about worst case scenario here.
Yeah.
But that right there is 30, 35, 40 grand.
Yeah.
And that's without. And then the last thing, which is really fun, is if I have jurisdictional wetlands.
Yeah, much more common. Much more common, at least in the
Okay.
Flagler Estates example.
But it could happen. All 3 could happen.
Happens. Yeah, those all happen. Yes. Commonly. Not rarely, commonly.
So define to somebody, what is a jurisdictionally wet, since I'm not speaking English clearly today, I should probably just slow down. Jurisdictionally wet. I didn't even say it right.
How do you spell it?
Oh, gosh. So wetlands,
Yeah.
how's that determined?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to get to that, but I want everybody to know. Oh, there I am. Okay. So you got me. I want everybody to know the worst calls I get a lot of calls, and some worse are from regulators, but really the worst calls I get are Hey, I just bought this piece of property and I was told to call you. I get him probably once a quarter.
That's like, hey, my house is burnt down. I'm calling you for the insurance policy.
Probably about at least once a quarter, I get that call. And I think to myself, well, obviously being at least have an undergraduate degree, I studied to take the test. I did my homework. So don't buy property without doing your due diligence.
Which would be, in this case, an environmental study.
Or a title report that shows that there's no ownership and encumbrance easements associated with the property that would affect the value of the property.
Let's say we do our search and it's clean. They still should hire you.
100%.
Ryan, because I'm not going to detect the tortoise on my title search, nor am I going to detect jurisdictionally wet land.
Yes. Yeah. So,
nor am I going to detect that eagle's nest.
Right.
Within 350 feet.
So wetlands are defined by three things: vegetation, soils, and water. And as I go forward with my career, which I'm now in like 33 years, in the beginning, people would say, well, I don't have wetlands on my property. Well, why do you say that? Well, I don't have a cypress tree. I don't have standing water, and I don't have muck. And wetlands are a lot more than that. Shockingly, a lot more than that. And when you look at those three parameters, so we'll talk about vegetation, in our county and all over Northeast Florida, we have a lot of planted pine plantation. When pines are planted in rows, like corn, they are a longer growing period agricultural crop. The state of Florida doesn't look at those pines. They're invisible because they were planted. Pine trees in natural environment is an upland plant. But when they're in a plantation, they're ignored. So if you look at a pine plant and you go to your property and I just got planted pines, I don't have anything to worry about. Well, hold on, because that's only one of the three parameters, and that is invisible. So then you go to the second parameter of soils. It's not just muck. If it was cypress trees and muck and standing water, I wouldn't be here, because my job would be so easy. Somebody would go, you got a wetland? You don't have a wetland. It would be black and white, and it is the farthest thing from black and white. It is extremely complicated to delineate wetlands. Even with my experience, I'm wrong or I'm right sometimes. It's debatable, because when you look at soils, which is that second parameter, you're looking at the grade and 6 inches below it. So you're actually excavating the top 6 inches, and in the case of the federal wetland definition, the top 10 inches. And you're looking for details in the soil profile that would indicate that the groundwater comes up into that 6-inch mark. Now, if you have those details, that's the second parameter. So now you have vegetation and soils, which is below ground 6 inches or 10 inches. And then the third thing is water or evidence of water. So if it's standing water, cypress, and muck, yeah, it's a wetland. Okay, you got me. But if you had some sphagnum moss, which is a type of moss on the field, that's a hydrologic indicator. If you have above ground ant hills that would elude that the fire ants couldn't be below ground.
Oh, wow.
Well, now they're above ground.
You start seeing ant hill mines. There I go again. Mounds. That's going to be one of those days.
Well, I got them really nervous,
That's what it is. Ryan intimidates me.
Yeah.
So you see anthill mounds above ground.
Sure.
That's an indication.
Because the groundwater table is high, and that's an indicator of hydrology. So
and we have
staining leaves where you could see water was standing for a long time. The agencies will use that as a hydrologic indicator. So it's not just water all the time. It's the indicators of water. Those are the three parameters that make up
the old
a well.
adage of, well, before I have Ryan inspect this property, I need to go ahead and bush hog it and make sure it's nice and clear and rake it clean, and that's not going to help.
Maybe.
Well, there you go. Hint one. Get your property.
But number one, you got to do your due diligence. You have to know what you're buying. That affects the value of the property.
Habitat, wetlands, and those two risks are pretty serious, actually.
Extremely serious.
And so
mitigation. So if you had wetlands, and we've had this happen in Flagler Estates, as an example, where someone buys a property, they didn't do their due diligence, they submitted a building permit application to put their double wide or their single family house or whatever it is that they were putting out there, and the county looks at all the maps and goes, I think you might have wetlands, you need to do a wetland assessment. And they go online and they talk to some people, and we get contacted, we go out there and we look, lo and behold, it's 80% wetlands. Well, this is my dream to have this property, so what do I do? And so we go to get a permit from the DEP and potentially the Corps of Engineers. And it's the mitigation cost is to compensate for the fill of the wetland, it's $20,000. And they say, well, I just bought this property for $40,000 and I got a double wide and now I got to pay another $20,000. This is the liability. So just do your due diligence.
Now, on that Flagler Estates example, if it's 100% wet, is there a workaround where is there an automatic certain percentage of the lot that can be impacted without having to mitigate? Is there something in the rule that allows people, like, as the faith promoting rumors out there are that there is some type of rule in protection in place to protect those who may have bought a 100% wet lot and they're just going to put a house on a postage stamp.
So you still have to mitigate.
Okay, so it still costs money.
Still costs money.
Okay.
There's a out provision in the Water Management District, DEP's. It's called the Statewide Environmental Resource Permit Guideline. It's SWRP for short. And there's an out provision that if you buy wetland mitigation bank credits in basin, you do not have to exhibit avoidance or minimization of wetland impact.
And that's the you can't create easements that aren't next to an easement of regional impact. Is that what that's all about?
It's about the
because
the premise. So here, this is going to be a lot. And anybody that ever watches this, and I'm going to say it to you, Rusty, you might get it, and I'm going to say it. I could say it if you wake me up at 2:30 in the morning and say it. I would say it. The whole idea of wetlands protection is, number one, to protect the wetlands, right? So the agencies are going to want you to exhibit avoidance and minimization of wetland impact to the maximum extent practicable to achieve your project purpose.
Okay.
That's their goal. So they're going to say, well, what's your project purpose? And you're going to say, to build a house. And they're going to go, well, we want you to achieve that purpose. Well, in certain instances, they'll tell you, show me 4 or 5 other sites that didn't work for you to build a house. That's the Corps, not the state. But in that case, they would want you to make it as small as possible. And somebody in Flagler Estates, for example, they go, well, I got 1.25 acres. It's been my dream to have some land. I didn't want to be in a subdivision. I wanted to be out here in the woods. And you're going to go, great. Well, you could fill a 30 by 40 area, put your double wide there, have a parking there, and the rest of it's got to be wetlands to remain.
That's could be a deal killer.
Or it costs you, right now, wetland mitigation bank credits is in that area is going for around $90,000 per acre equivalent. Per acre equivalent. So if you wanted to fill 0.2 of an acre, we'll do the math. That's $20,000. That's what I was saying.
Okay. So, but don't they sell them by credits? What is a credit?
They sell it using in the legislature in February 1st of 2004 required the mitigation wetland mitigation currency to be called UMAM, and that stands for Unified Mothers Against Monkeys.
Makes more sense.
It stands for Unified Mitigation Assessment Methodology. And it's essentially a way to apply science to the impact and then to the mitigation area. And in the instance of a mitigation bank, they sell, the agencies grant them based on the mitigative work that they're doing, recording conservation easements, doing enhancement or restoration on this property that they have this mitigation bank over. The agencies give them a ledger of UMAM units, of UMAM credits.
So they have 1,000 acres, and they're going to dedicate that for the credits.
Yeah.
And as those credits are sold, they put easements on that 1,000 acres.
No, they put an easement up front on the whole 1,000 acres,
which equals so many credits.
Yeah. And then they do enhancement. They do prescribed burning. They do pine thinning. They do ditch restoration. They do nuisance exotic species eradication.
Okay.
And every one of those restorative activities gets additional credit,
Okay.
and they need
And
to
which
do
means
those.
they can then make more money by selling those credits.
Correct.
Now, if I buy a lot that's really, really wet, it's going to take more credits to offset that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Or is my terminology incorrect?
No, it's all about it's about the UMAM. The
The
UMAM
impact that it has on the environment.
impact in the UMAM. We used to use ratios, which at a ratio of 15-1 for a low quality wetland impact to preservation.
15-1.
Yeah, 50. That was
I mean,
old.
that's-
That was 20 years
Okay,
ago.
but that would be 15 credits to one.
No. 15 acres
Okay.
of preservation
Okay.
to 1 acre, and
Okay.
and that was a low quality, and then 20-1, 20 acres of preservation, and then 25-1 acres to 1 acre. That was what we used to do,
Okay.
kind of pre 2004. Now, if you actually do the UMAM, and this was something that developers knew that was going to happen because it's regulatory creep is real. It's somewhere in the 30 to 40-1 ratio, because somebody will go, well, I'll just record the easement over, 0.7 acres that I have, and I'll do the impacts on my Flagler Estates lot. It's like, that's not going to work.
It used to work that way, though.
It did used to work
'cause
that way.
If you bought 5 lots in Flagler Estates, you could put an easement on 3 of them and impact the 2.
It did used to work
But
that
they won't
way.
do that now.
And they don't do that, and here's why. And this was beginning in 2000. Well, it's not beginning. In 2007, the federal government has what's called the EPA mitigation rule, and they no longer and the state will accept conservation easements over property. The state will, but the
Okay.
federal doesn't. And the federal doesn't
So the
because
federal does, but then it doesn't work.
well, it's complicated.
Okay.
But I could explain.
We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that. But the reason why the feds stopped doing that was because the feds had wetlands protected by law. They already protected what you can and can't do on wetlands. So why are they going to give you credit to protect what they're already protecting by law?
Gotcha.
Now, that is the premise behind the 2007 EPA mitigation rule. That mitigation rule also sets precedent to going to a mitigation bank first and foremost, because at a mitigation bank, the agencies can control the restorative activities, the recording a conservation easement over a large enough area of land to provide regionally ecological value.
Okay.
So I know that's all a lot to take care and take in.
No, it's very important. You listen, we're in Florida. You get Mr. Redneck with his property rights, and this is a real issue for him. My land.
I understand
Yeah.
completely.
Well, you've had to deal with it.
Yeah, well, and I understand as well.
Yeah.
But
And-
the reason that wetlands are protected is for water recharge, wildlife, and both of those are as a population in our best interest.
Well, we can't drink salt water.
Right.
And so, and something you taught me, which I thought was very important, because I had a hard time with this topic. And when you sat me down one day, I don't know if you remember this, but you sat me down and you explained it to me that if the water just runs off into the ocean, we can't drink that.
Right.
And so by virtue of these basins holding that water and percolating into the aquifer,
Right.
that's drinking water.
That's right.
Now, when I heard how long it takes for that water to percolate into the aquifer, that was sort of disturbing. Somebody told me, I think it was you or somebody, how many years it takes for that actually to percolate into the aquifer. But that's one of the reasons that you just don't want to build and drain, because then we have no drinking water.
Yeah. And we drink that water. That's the water we drink. That is water
Yes.
we drink. Comes
From
from
those
well fields.
awesome smelly swamps. That's where we get our drinking water.
Ultimately, yeah.
I
Yep.
call them smelly. But so when you talk about the agencies that somebody has to deal with, or that you have to deal with, a person, and we're using Flagler Estates, it just seems to be an easy example. You buy a lot in Flagler Estates, and just as a reminder, Flagler Estates is an unrecorded subdivision, so it was all divided up. You can't do that legally now, because anytime you do a subdivision now, they deal with all this mitigation. When you buy your lot, the mitigation has already been done.
Right.
What can be impacted, what can't be. You have
Right.
setbacks and so forth from that. So Flagler Estates is just an easy thing to pick on. And on that setback issue, what is the setbacks on wetlands, by the way?
So if it's a county, it's a county and potentially
and
the
I was going
DEP.
somewhere different now, but I want to
that's
make sure
fine.
I ask that question.
The county,
because,
if you're in St. Johns County, and the wetland is isolated, geographically and hydrologically isolated.
By itself, sitting in a little.
There's no buffer required.
No buffer required.
If it's an isolated wetland.
That I didn't know. That's actually very important
Yeah.
information. So if I have this little piece of wetlands in the middle of my area and people want to build right up to it, as long as you're not encroaching on the wetlands, you can do so.
Yeah.
Interesting.
If
That's
it's a
very important.
contiguous wetland, connected wetland, there's for St. Johns County, a minimum of 10, average a 25-foot undisturbed upland buffer.
Okay. All right. But let me get back to what I was actually trying to get to. When somebody's dealing with a Flagler Estates lot and they're dealing with wetlands, an individual homeowner would deal with the DEP.
Yeah.
Department of Environmental Protection for the state of Florida.
Right.
Corps of Army Engineers? No.
It depends if it's a contiguous wetland or not. So in the last 25 years, the waters of the U.S. definition, which is known as WOTUS, just like Rusty would know about SCOTUS or POTUS. So WOTUS, the law has changed 4 times in the last 25 years on what is a wetland for the United States of America. Because when you're making a law for the country, it's everywhere from Utah to New York to Florida. It's everywhere. So what is a wetland? And in the last update, waters of the U.S. definition was 2023, just 2 years ago.
Recently, yeah.
And it's called the Sackett case, which basically said that you have to have a relatively permanent connection. It has to be a continuous connection of water.
So if
Basically.
you got like Deep Creek,
Yeah.
that runs into the St. Johns.
That's jurisdiction, waters of the U.S. That's the WOTUS.
Right. So those swamps that surround Deep Creek would fall under the DEP.
Well, so
I'm
you
sorry,
would-
the
Army
Corps
Corps
of
of
Army
Engineers.
Engineers. Yeah. So it would fall under the Corps. Does DEP have any say though?
Well, it would be both. You would be getting a state and federal permit then
You
at
would
that
have to.
point.
But if it's self-contained,
Then it would only be the state of Florida. It's
DEP.
DEP, yep.
now the St. Johns River Water Managed District. So why the difference? You have the St. Johns
Yeah.
River Water Managed District that takes care of larger,
Residential, 4 or more units.
4 more units.
And
why the
commercial.
difference? Why make it that complicated? Because of government?
Yes.
So
Yeah, I'll tell you why. Because in the 80s, you used to have the Department of Natural Resources, you had the Department of Environmental Protection, and you had I can't remember, there was a third one. At one point we had, in the 80s, we had 4 different wetland definitions. We had 4 different wetland lines per property at one period of time. And it was before my time, in the 80s. It was just before my time. But everyone was going, "What? This is the dumbest thing. Why we have 4 different jurisdictional wetland lines?" And so now we have primarily one jurisdictional wetland line. For years, we've been putting in one jurisdictional wetland line as a generality.
now the National Wetlands map,
Yeah.
that's put out by the Corps of Army Engineers.
No, it was put out by the NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Service,
Okay.
which also does the soils maps.
Is that pretty reliable?
It is a good tool, but it's not that reliable.
Gives you an idea.
Yeah.
If your property, if that map shows that your property has some type of wetlands on it, it's probably pretty good indication.
Yeah,
it
you
is.
would want to hire someone like me to go out, my company.
Again, I
to go
think if
out
you're
and-
buying land anyhow, you'd want to hire
Yeah,
you.
but
Period.
the,
on any
the
land.
other thing people will say, I just bought this piece of property. I was told to call.
Yeah.
Well, I looked at the county's wetlands layer and it wasn't any wetlands on there, but now I submitted my permit application and the county is saying I might have wetlands. And how can it say that on that map?
Right.
Well, it's a tool, but don't rely on it. Everyone, do your due diligence.
So when
please.
somebody hires you to go out and do delineation to their property, and you basically go out there and mark it.
Yeah.
And that's all they get unless they get a survey to go out there
Well-
and I know you give some nice pretty maps.
Yes.
But that's still not a survey.
Right. We're not surveyors.
Right. So you go out there, you mark it with flags.
And we GPS it with a sub-meter accurate GPS. Okay. We have the latest, every year we get the latest county's digital plat. So we select that parcel, we export that boundary, and then we bring our GPS points over it. We create a pretty map. You've seen them.
Yeah.
It shows wetlands, uplands, their acreage and configuration. And that way you know what you're getting.
And then that, if it's just one lot, it's subject to review by the DEP, or is it's like the IRS, they can audit you maybe, but maybe not?
The DEP wouldn't audit us. It would be the county, because what's going to happen is that applicant builder, who they're going to apply for a building permit, and they're going to show on their site plan, here's where the wetlands that Carter identified, and here's where I'm putting my house. And if it's an isolated wetland, there's no buffer. Here's the buffer. Here's setbacks, side yard setbacks, front yard setbacks, and all the things that are required. And then the county can choose to go, I don't know, I'm looking at maps. I don't necessarily agree with what Carter Environmental put in, and they'll go out and take a look.
By the way, that doesn't happen very often.
It doesn't happen very often.
Because I think you've earned the county's respect.
That is true, but
I think that's why you get hired a lot, Ryan.
That is true, because reputation is everything.
Yes.
However, in order to be a environmental professional or a wetland scientist, we don't have to get a certification like a professional land surveyor, a state licensed professional land surveyor, or a state licensed professional engineer, or a state licensed landscape architect. We do not have a state license. In the 80s, there was a group of people that proposed to have a environmental professional licensed, and the surveyors and the engineers fought against it, and we still 30 some odd years later.
How do you become a professional wetland
Well,
scientist?
I have a certification from an international accreditation company.
You can just work in this industry just because you're knowledgeable about what
you could. And the problem is when there's a high demand during COVID, for example, speaking of Flagler Estates or any single family, interest rates were super low. People were buying everything. They were buying everything you get your hands on. And I have 12 people that work with me. And I've had 12 people for probably about 4 or 5 years, just because I like that small family size. We were 65 days out from if somebody calls, that's how far out we were. And at that time, people would go other places, and there was a big opportunity. And so other people realized that, hey, I can do delineation. Sure, you don't have to have a license to do it. I kind of think I got it figured out. And they would start doing delineation. They get a map from somebody. They would buy the property. They would apply to the county. So-and-so did a delineation. The county would go, I don't know about this. And they would go out into the field and they would look at it and go, I don't think that this is right. Call up DEP. DEP would come out and go, this isn't right. And those people were charlatans. They were imposters. And they ultimately, one bad apple spoils it from the bunch. So beginning last year, we had to provide a much more detailed report that went along with our map. So it's not just the map anymore. And it costs us more time. But the idea was that we would be providing more information to the county so that they could say, not just here's your map, but here's the reason why you delineated it the way it is. Here's a description of the existing site conditions. Here's photographs of the site. And here's the explanation on why you have the jurisdictional line where it is. So that they could look at that as the county and go, all right, this makes sense, or maybe it doesn't make sense.
But if he's got 4 lots, then the county will go to St. Johns River Water Managed District instead. If it's 4 or more lots.
If there's proposed impacts in any way, shape, or form to that, I would.
What would you say?
There's always, knowledge is power. And my job is to help my clients navigate the maze of these local, state, and federal regulations in order to get the best outcome for them.
Now, how often do you have the St. Johns County or DEP or St. Johns River Water Managed District, for that matter, because you've done big and small, you've done all types of projects. Mm-hmm. How many times have they come back to you and said, hey, we need to refigure this?
Oh, the wetland line? Uh-huh. Like every time?
Okay. But
that's their job.
Yeah. And they're gonna assert that authority.
Yeah.
And do you are you successful at arguing back with them?
Of course.
And saying, hey, you need to back off a little bit. I think you're being too aggressive.
Yes.
Has it ever worked the other way where they were less aggressive than you?
Rarely.
I bet. Yeah. So in dealing with the DEP, St. John's River Water Management District, the Corps of Army Engineers, you deal with all of them.
Mhm.
Okay. What would be the cost for someone, and we're getting Flagler Estates again, acre and a quarter, to have you delineate? But see, to me, I don't think they should just have you delineate. I think they should get the Mac Daddy, which is check for the animals.
Yeah, we would do that while we're on site.
So that's an
We would look
automatic
for
thing.
wetlands
So when
and
you give a
protected
quote
species.
for the wetlands mitigation, it also includes the
Yeah, because we're
species.
physically on site.
Okay.
We are walking the site specifically looking for the wetlands. The technology today is unbelievable, as we all know.
That's awesome.
It's unbelievable. So I could see things now more clear than I ever could. But in Flagler Estates, as I mentioned before, in that particular instance, the ditches and drainage and the canals that have been put in there have altered the groundwater. And they've altered the groundwater by design. That's what ditches
Right.
and canals do. So I had one just last week where I provided a proposal. The lady gave us her money, and she got another response late back from another consultant. And the other consultant said, I don't think you should waste your time with this property. I think it's all wet. And I went and looked at this. My associates were looking at this, and I went and looked at it, and I emailed her back. And I said, look, you have to understand, just because it shows up on the National Wetlands Inventory map as a wetland, there's a big canal next to this property. And canals are like, if I cut my veins, they're going to bleed out real fast. And those canals drain the groundwater from the adjacent property. Why do they do that? That's what they were designed to do. That's what they're designed
And that
to
was
do.
back when it was they called what was that act called? The Reclamation Act, where they were actually the state of Florida was encouraging
Of course.
draining
Yes.
property
For
and
agriculture.
reclaiming. What was
Yeah.
that terminology, Russ? Do you remember what that was called? It was the Florida Reclamation Act or something.
Yeah,
where
of course.
yeah, and so
I don't know anything
canal
about that.
they wanted you to ditch, canal, and
Of
drain.
course. Yeah. Yes.
You know, that was the motive. That
Yeah.
Put it
was
this way, I don't think Disney World would be what it is today.
if it wasn't for that.
Yeah. Nor would Big Sugar or all that
Yeah.
stuff down in the Everglades. Yeah, of course.
So you're basically telling me that you can, well, I don't want to say you can now, but some property was able to be
Yes.
fixed
Yes.
because of that draining.
100%.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. Think about Deep Creek in Flagler Estates.
Yeah.
Look at it on an aerial. Was it naturally a canal?
No,
No.
that was
But
done.
by making it into a canal, they get more water off that property faster.
Right.
And that's why you look at those National Wetlands Inventory maps, and it's a tool. But do not rely on it.
Okay.
You know? So, anyhow.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to bring up that one day
You were asking about price.
I
Before
wasn't
I was
asking about
gonna-
price,
yeah.
and I appreciate it. Let's finish that first,
Yeah.
and I have something else to
So for
to talk
single
about.
families out in Flagler Estates, I think we're doing them for
Acre and a quarter.
$750.
$750,
Yeah, and
and
that's
that includes the species and
the
everything.
report and everything. And then if we're doing double, some people are buying two. I think we're at $9 or $950. Not much better.
That is such vital money to spend if you're developing raw land that's not in a recently platted subdivision.
Yeah, and right now we're running about 15 business days out.
Okay. If you buy in a platted subdivision, that's not a guarantee either. We have some older platted subdivisions that have wetlands.
Yep.
Fox Hollow, Rusty, I believe it is. Is it Fox Hollow?
Over by the
The movie theater?
Yeah. I didn't know they had wetlands.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
there's
that's all wet.
in the west side
The
of
whole
it.
the whole
The,
subdivision
the
is wet.
plat. Well, not where the existing properties are, but
No.
the west side of it. Yeah. Yeah. So
So that's not just because it's a platted subdivision, not a guarantee either.
no,
but
but
a more recently platted
yes,
subdivision, you're
80s.
gonna, yes, 80s
Yeah.
on. You
yeah,
think?
80, 85 on.
Okay.
Yeah. And if the subdivision is in compliance and the one lot or two lots are left over and they were never built on, the water management district will honor whatever the original permitted wetland lines are. So they're
Okay.
so if I go out there and there's wetlands out there, but I look and do the research and there's an existing valid water management district permit that's in compliance, they'll honor whatever the permit conditions were, because if you bought the subdivision was permanent in 1995, and your grandfather bought a lot in there, and his dream was to move in down there, and he was going to build on that lot number 26, and now we're going, and then he had a heart attack and he died. Your dad gets it, or then your grandfather, was in the will to give to you, and you get it. Well, you had financial expectations that lot, which was permitted and platted, was buildable. And for the district to come back 20 years later and go, well, yeah, it was permitted and platted and it was designated as uplands and now it's wetlands, that's pretty big takings.
It is.
So
as they build these houses, they drain to the lots that have never been developed. And so they become wetlands. And so, but the district's been good about, the district, would that be the district?
Yeah, the water management district, because it's inside of a water management district permitted subdivision.
Okay. But if it's not been one of those permitted subdivisions, then obviously you've got a problem.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't upset me very much because whenever I've
do often people upset you, Steve?
No. But you did one time.
Oh, because I gave you bad report.
Well, no, you've given me bad reports before because you give me the truth, and I know I can trust what you're giving me. I think there are some environmentalists out there, and I call them environmentalists. Is that a correct terminology?
It's not.
Okay. So I have to call you professional wetlands?
No, environmental consultant.
Environmental consultant.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's other environmental consultants out there who are heavily aggressive on delineating
Yeah.
where they show a lot more wet than what you would.
Well, that would be conservative.
Conservative.
Yeah.
So they're very conservative on their assessments.
Right.
You've come in and you've fixed that and helped us. And I mean, you've been wonderful. One time though, you blew my freaking mind and I couldn't believe you said it, that we had this lot totally looked dry, but you called it upland wetlands.
Oh, legal. Yeah, that it would be legal uplands, or excuse me, illegal uplands. If that was the case, that happens too.
There's nothing, no indicate. This was just like, I told my client, listen, Ryan's great. It's always good to have that just because you buy it and you want that just in case, spend your money, and then you gave us that assessment. I'm like, so Ryan's off my Christmas list.
Yeah. So what could happen is if a property has been filled historically, let's use current time. So property was filled in 2000.
Okay.
And buyer A gets the property and he has 10 acres. He fills 10 acres of wetlands. He subdivides it into 5 2-acre lots, ranchettes, sells it to 5 different people. They're thrilled. 3 guys build on it, no problems. One guy goes to build on it and he goes to buy it, and I get called and I go out and I do a historical aerial chronology. I look at, what did it look like? Because now, remember, you can find your lost dog on Google Earth. You could go back and see almost every single year, and all of a sudden, I look and I go, hey, in 2004, this whole area was filled, and you run risk of applying to the county or applying to the DEP, or let's say that there was a wetland, or let's just say you apply to the county, and then the county goes, gosh, I'm looking back in the aerials and hey, this thing was fully filled. And even though you didn't do it, which I've had this happen before, even though the buyer didn't do it, which is now the owner, the county could report that property as filled to the DEP. DEP shows up, hey, this property was filled. You now need to mitigate for it after the fact.
What about the ones that have the houses?
Uplands today. It's just raw land.
Oh,
so
wow.
It's uplands today, but it's not legal uplands. It's illegal uplands.
Okay.
And in that case, you would have a liability.
What about the people who have the houses already built?
The house is already built. The DEP could come back to them and seek mitigation. I've had this happen. Same scenario I'm describing. And those people go, I have no idea. I bought the property like this. I built a house. Got a permit from X county, and nobody ever said anything to me. And then all the neighbors, what are they going to do? Let's go back to the chain of title.
Right.
And who did everybody buy this from? And what year did this happen? That guy had to pay.
And those guys don't play. When you mess with those guys, they don't play. We've seen, judgments against individuals who have messed with the DEP, hundreds of thousands of dollars in one instance, We had another instance where a guy just decided to put a driveway in to his house, brought in fill. That cost him $60,000.
Yep.
To tear it out. They made him tear it out.
Yep.
And that's not including what he lost in the materials.
Yep.
That was just the cost for penalties and fines and whatever
Yep.
the charges for doing that. So I guess the thing is just remember to, always talk to you before they do anything. I want to get to another point real quickly. Our time's about to run short. Ryan, I really appreciate you being here. Ryan Carter from Carter Environmental Services. He's a professional wetlands scientist. You can reach him at 904-540-1786. Again, that's 904-540-1786. Don't buy land without them. I mean, there's certain things you just shouldn't do. It's risk that's just not worth taking. Not in Florida. We live in a beautiful state, and it's partly beautiful because of people like Ryan and the DEP and the St. Johns River Water Management District and the Corps of Army Engineers and things like that to protect our aquifer and making sure that we have drinking water and a beautiful place to live. But don't buy land without them. It's just too crazy. Ryan, I want to get to private environmental easements because we know that people can put environmental easements and give them to the state. And I don't really understand the process of that. You're involved in that a lot, and where somebody takes their land and they say, we're going to do a conservation easement and give it to the DEP or the St. Johns River Water Management District, which I see more of actually.
Yeah.
And that way that land is preserved forever. What would it take to get one of those easements removed and released, do you think?
The more recently, so it used to have to get a release or an amendment. It's much easier to get an amendment of an easement because that's done on the staff level. But if it's a release, it's the governing board at St. Johns River Water Management District governing board would have to release it, and they don't like to release perpetual conservation easements.
I've never seen an easement.
We've amended them.
I've never seen an amended one.
Frequently, I would say, not frequently, but it's pretty common to get a release, or a partial release and amendment.
Okay.
And typically, we get those when you have a road widening project.
Okay. That makes sense.
So going back to my avoidance and minimization to the maximum extent practical, if you have an existing road, where else are you going to put it?
Right.
So there's no alternative site to put a road.
And if you did, it would just impact it more.
Sure.
Right.
So when we widen roads, for instance, County Road 210, which if you've driven down that road, there was a section that was widened and then a section that wasn't, which was a bottleneck, and then it's widened again. Now it's being all widened, and hopefully it'll help that traffic congestion there. When that happened, there were subdivisions all adjacent to it, and there was pieces of conservation easements that were into that right of way. Tiny. I mean, you're into 600, 700 square feet of conservation easements. And in order to get the road right of way so that it's a 2-lane divided safe road, they had to release those easements.
So they modified that. We are now, and those easements are recorded. Some people are allowing those, they do the easements, okay? And even in some points, they get the credits, okay? And then they stop paying the taxes.
Yeah.
So what happens then?
Well, then it goes on to the courthouse steps.
And then you buy that and it's good for nothing because the easement's there. Right?
Yes.
We had a private person do that in Flagler States too. What's their name?
Well, you probably don't want to mention their name.
No, we will. We
Yeah,
have
Putnam
Putnam
something.
Land Conservatory.
Yeah.
Okay.
Putnam, they buy land dirt cheap. They'll put a private easement on it, just an easement for no reason, but just to keep the trees there. And then they just stop paying the taxes and wait for some. They don't wait. They just walk away. And then people will buy the taxes. And the tax deed does not wipe out that easement. We know.
That's an interesting because that group is out of pocket for the purchase of the property.
But
Right.
their whole purpose is to put the easement there. That's what they want. Preservation. They don't care about selling it in the future.
No, I
or doing
understand
anything
that.
else with. Yes.
No, I understand that. It's just that's a pretty fascinating model.
It is.
Well, if you buy it at tax deed for the right price.
Oh, I got you. Yes, if you bought it in tax deed for the right price.
But then you put the easement on it,
then
and then let it go to
you're
taxes.
yeah, right.
Then
That's
you,
fine.
Yeah, you pay the taxes for 1 year, put the easement on it, and then stop paying the taxes. Then somebody comes in and buys
Yeah,
Tax sale.
there's no profit motive. It's just preservation.
just for preservation.
Yeah.
Another reason why you don't ever buy property without getting the title insurance policy.
Yeah.
Because these easements do exist.
Sure.
And you're not getting those released. We've tried. Call the Putnam Land Conservatory. The answer's new. Okay. And it's spelled that way.
Yeah.
And we've had a gentleman in Jacksonville take a platted subdivision. Platted subdivision has been there for years. He bought several vacant lots. Just put easements on them. Didn't pay the taxes.
Yeah.
And what did the developer do? One guy who builds houses bought the lot, started building his house.
Oh. Whoops.
Didn't pay attention to his title insurance policy. It says subject to conservation.
So do you have to demo it and restore?
You know, he actually paid money. It cost them a lot of money to get that released.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, but it's just interesting how this works. So mitigation banks, and we only have about 8 more minutes. You know, I want to not be that redneck, but how the good old fashioned Floridian looks at mitigation banks is it's a racket. And they do that because they have these banks, right? And you have to buy within these banks. You can't go outside the bank.
Well, you can now. There's a new law that just got passed.
Okay, share that with me.
So the racket is you have to buy inside that bank. Right. So
and
that's
explain that real quickly because I think
basins.
It's basins.
Yeah.
So if I'm in a geographical area where the water percolates into that basin,
Yeah.
if I want to impact the wetlands, I have to buy the credits within that basin.
Yes.
Okay.
That's
And
it.
now the law is
So the problem that happened over the last few years was mitigation banks were sold out. COVID, massive amounts of development, low interest rates, a lot of people were building like crazy. Now, of course, I think new build permits in St. Johns County. I was talking to someone a few days ago. New build permits are down 50%. St. Johns County, 50% they're down, but they were up 10 million%, and everybody was building, and everybody wanted to come here, and
Right.
we were going, and mitigation banks sold out of credits. So you have a law that says, well, in order to compensate for your wetland impact, you got to buy mitigation bank credits, but there were no mitigation bank credits. So
well,
then
if there was a few left, they were really, really expensive.
super expensive, but we'll talk about that.
Okay.
There's none. You got a project, it needs 0.5 mitigation bank credits, but there's no mitigation bank credits. Guess what that project cannot do?
Move forward.
Can't get its permit.
Yeah.
So now that law was affecting progress, and it was a major problem. People were complaining about it because you couldn't get your permit, you couldn't build, you couldn't go forward because you couldn't get your mitigation. So legislature, beginning July 1st of this year, Senate Bill 492 became effective. And if there are no mitigation bank credits in that basin that you need credits in, you can go out of basin. It's called the proximity.
Wow.
It's called the proximity factor, but you get a 20% markup to do that. So if we needed 1 credit in basin 5, you could go to basin 9 for 1.2.
I mean, that's good news. That works. Yeah.
The flexibility is there.
Okay. Cost you more.
Cost you more. And because of the fact that there was such a demand on mitigation banks, which are private entities,
They are.
then when there's a high demand and a low supply, I don't want you to answer this. This is really complicated. I want Rusty to say it. So when there's a high demand and a low supply, what happens to the price?
Don't be smart, Rusty.
It's going to go up.
It's going to go up.
Dramatic.
And it went up dramatically. It
Yeah.
went up and it went up and it went up. And, in 5 years in our St. Augustine Basin, for example, as an example, in 2019, we were getting credits for $75,000 per credit, UMAM unit, which equated to about $49,000 per acre of wetland impact. Now it's 165 or 175 per credit, which is about 125-ish per acre of wetland impact.
And
So that's more than double.
but some basins are more expensive than other basins.
That's right. And some types
and,
are more expensive. And I was on a call 2 hours ago where somebody told me the price, and my jaw dropped. I I haven't got recovered
But
because
Ryan-
it was so much money per credit.
But Ryan, can't you shop that? So if I look to basin
because
basin 8 and or whatever the number is,
Yeah.
and the credits are just so expensive, I said, well, I don't want to buy those credits. I'll go to the next basin
No,
only if they run out.
Yeah, only if they run out.
Oh wow! So that rule's not so awesome as I
And
thought it was gonna
if you
be.
need a specific kind of credit, like if you're impacting forested wetlands, you need to mitigate with forested wetlands. If you're impacting herbaceous wetlands, you have to mitigate. If you're impacting salt marsh, you have to mitigate with salt marsh.
Okay,
And you know how many salt marsh mitigation banks there are in Northeast Florida?
probably very little.
One. So going back to Rusty's excellent answer on supply and demand, the price would make it just. I haven't recovered from what I just heard 2 hours ago.
Yeah, and part of my frustration is you used to be able to spot mitigate. Not spot.
Yeah, you used to be able to mitigate on site.
So I could take my 20 acres and say, you know what, I'm going to sell off 10 acres of wetlands and not sell it off, but put credits on it and put an easement on it. They don't do that anymore.
They do for the state, but here's the major difference. When you're recording a conservation easement over wetlands, we call it wetland preservation, you still have to, when you're buying mitigation bank credits, you do not have to exhibit avoidance and minimization.
Okay.
So let's say you have a road that's going into your development and you have 3 lots on either side, because double loading a road is more cost effective. You're paying for the road, you're paying for water, sewer. You're going to want to maximize the amount of lots on that road. Well, if there's a wetland on one side of it, then they would say, well, you've got to avoid those 3 lots. You have to drop those 3 or 4 lots or whatever it is. And you're going to go, no, I don't. I'm going to buy wetland mitigation bank credits. There's an out provision. I don't have to demonstrate avoidance minimization. Now, and that's true. And they would say, okay, fine. Sorry, you got us. If we said, well, I want to mitigate with 30, 40 acres of wetland preservation, recording a conservation easement in perpetuity over it, they would say, well, you need to demonstrate avoidance minimization. So the mitigation bank justifies not having to exhibit avoidance minimization, whereas wetland preservation doesn't.
Okay, but you still can spot mitigate on your own property?
You can.
I did not know.
But you
I thought
have to
that
go-
was changed. I thought you had to be next to an easement of regional impact.
You can for the state. You can.
Okay.
But it has to be appropriate. And there's all kinds of judgments and interpretation
Okay.
that the agencies have, and they're not going to be in your favor.
I get that, but I've had people who want to buy 120 acres.
Yeah.
Okay. And they just need 10 acres that they can use and enjoy. And the rest of it is pretty much
Okay,
wet.
so if the ratio was 40-1 and they wanted to get that land out of that, but they have to demonstrate avoidance and minimization to the maximum extent
But
practical
they're
to
not
use the
impacting
on-site.
it. Let's just say they just want to put an easement on it and make some money.
You could.
Okay. I unfortunately misunderstood.
You could. The
and
problem.
I thought that wasn't the
and
rule.
here's the problem. And I'm not paying attention to the clock, so I don't know how much time we have.
We got 2 more minutes.
2 more minutes. You could do that, but then you got to get an ownership and encumbrance report. Then you got to
Fine.
get a legal description and sketch from a
Fine.
mitigation bank, and then you got to go through the district and get them to approve all that.
And you would do all that for them.
I would facilitate that. You would do the title work.
Yes.
Or Rusty would do the attorney's title of opinion. We would hire a surveyor to do but that process is about 3 to 4 months
That's fine.
versus, and if you're the seller, if you're the developer, you want your permit. You want your permit. Time is money. So you're going to go to the mitigation bank, pay them.
I get that.
You're done.
But if I'm Mr. Farmer Dude, not Mr. Farmer Dude, I'm just a guy that just wants to buy and live out in the woods, and I've got 120 acres that I'm not going to do anything with. I just want it to have little, birdies and deer and tortoises, and I don't want to touch it. I could sell credits.
You could.
Okay. That is, I've messed up, man.
You could.
I left.
But you
lot-
have to have somebody to buy it.
Well, if people need credits, they'll buy it.
It's not credits. You're selling wetland preservation. And it's more complicated because most people are going to go, I just want to go and pay for the mitigation bank credits.
I get it.
That's what
But
most
there is a
people are going to want to
possibility.
do.
You would help them. You counsel them.
I can help.
All right. Ryan Carter. Carter Environmental Services. He's a professional wetlands scientist. And you can reach him at 904-540-1786. You'd be foolish to buy land without him. He needs to be able to go out there and check it out for you so that you don't you don't get stuck with something that you have a lot of added cost and expense to that you were not planning. Also, always remember, get owner's title insurance. These easements do exist, and if you buy a property that has an easement and you're not paying attention, you could have a worthless piece of property, basically. And it's always good to have a smart attorney like Rusty, who is a land dirt attorney. He's great at deciphering those title commitments and title policies, letting you know what's there. Rusty, what does it cost for somebody to go to you and say, "Hey, man, just look over my title insurance commitment, represent me in my closing"?
As a buyer, typically $400. It doesn't take a lot because there's not a whole lot of time necessary to do it in most cases.
What if they're getting financing with a conventional bank?
Basically the same, because all I'm doing is, and I can help make a closing happen a lot quicker because I already understand the documents.
Right, you understand title.
I also understand the closing documents, and I can close them as fast as they'll sign them because I already understand what it says, and I know how to explain that to the buyer.
How do they find you, Rusty?
904-829-6600.
904-829-6600. Don't ask for him, ask for Ben. Then we have Julie here. Thank you for being with us, Julie. Ryan, seriously, man, I really appreciate it. This was really great.
Hope it helps.
This is a lot of interesting things. At least for me, it is. Affects me greatly. I mean, we deal with people's land ownership, and this is one of those things that can really cause a lot of problems because of your education. I've really stood out in the crowd with being able to talk intelligently to people, not give them any counsel. I just send them to you. Call Ryan.
Well, I appreciate that.
And what I should do is always text you when I'm sending you a referral. I don't do that. I just send them your direction.
That's fine. We're happy to help.
Yeah,
We've been doing this in this community for 25 years.
A great job. And the fact that you have the county's ear and the county listens to you is so vital in this business, actually. So I think if the county had a choice, they would choose you. That's just me speaking without any authority. That's just me talking. But this has been Land Title Talk. Thank you so much for listening in and watching. And remember to like and subscribe our videos. We appreciate you being there. We're going to see you next week. All right. Thank you very much.